Morning, everybody, and for those that had a chance to join us last night for the event at the superintendent's house, hopefully you enjoyed yourselves. Cedric, thank you and Cassandra for making it such a wonderful evening. We obviously, as always, have a very full couple of days together and a lot to cover. So I'm going to be a little more of a stickler on staying to time. Lot to cover. For the board members, you'll notice the package in front of you. This will be for discussion in closed session tomorrow. It's something that I think we'll pre-read, if you will. So please do have a chance, if you can, take a look at it before tomorrow's closed session. Again, we'll have a chance to get that. Welcome also to all the members of the VMI Institute team. It goes without saying how much we appreciate all the work that you all do each and every day, and we look forward to hearing some of the reports either in the board meeting now or in the committee meetings. Thank you to the agency for being present and commitment to support the Institute in our direction. So with that, unless anybody else has any introductory comments, maybe Cedric, I'll just move things over to you.
For Wi-Fi, the VMI guest Wi-Fi is not working right now. So there is a MiFi. You open your computer, one of the networks starts with Wi-Fi, M-I-F-I, and then the password is right here.
Thank you, Bill. I couldn't have taken you through that explanation, so I'm happy Bill did so. But I think, as everybody probably noticed, the guest piece was not. Like you, Cedric, your passcode for your bank account, or is
No.
So Bill, it's the Verizon one.
Yes.
all right, Cedric, I'll turn things to you though, if you can, and we'll get started.
Good. Good morning, everyone. Welcome back to VMI. Pleasure once again to be able to take us through another board meeting, annual board meeting. A lot of topics, as Mr. Watson mentioned. We're going to change kind of the sequence of events up a little bit. It'll be consistent with the schedule that you have in front of you, but I'm going to open up and just talk about a few things in terms of hitting some highlights of the year. Just tell you how well I think things are going in terms of the number of activities, the accomplishments, the visitors that we're having here on post, and then I'm going to switch it over to some of the Institute staff, because I think they have some pretty important and relevant topics for you all to think about and discuss. So we're going to have Joe and Shannon come up and talk a little bit about things from the perspective of strategic enrollment management right after me, so that you all get a flavor for where we are in our campaign for this year. And they'll do some highlights. They'll take any questions that you have, and I want to give them a good bit of time to go through things in case there are some questions. And then we'll switch over to the dean, where he can give you an update on things that are going on academically here at the Institute, both in terms of performance of our cadets and what he's seeing with respect to our academic program. And then we'll shift over to the commandant, who's going to talk about a number of things in terms of how this academic year has gone from the perspective of military life, and a couple of key programs that we have re-envisioned but re-implemented for the Institute. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to talk about two things. First, I'm going to talk about where we are with the strategic plan effort. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on where we were and where we are now, show you a little bit of the exemplars that are being worked with respect to the priorities and tasks and how we're assigning metrics to those efforts. And then I'm going to talk real quickly about the key decision that I believe, and give you my perspective on it, and also give you an understanding about where we are with respect to my recommendation to the board on whether or not you're recommending a tuition and fee increase. Had a real good, lengthy and healthy discussion yesterday with the Audit, Finance and Planning Committee chaired by Scott Wald. But I want to give you all a very, very condensed version as a board of what that looks like. the Institute in terms of where we see revenue and expenses going for next year. And that should close it out, at least from the Institute's perspective. Okay, so if we could go to the first chart. So I just want to highlight a number of things that have occurred, and it has been a very, very busy year for the Institute, needless to say, with a lot of activities, a lot of visitors, and a number of events that have occurred both here on post as well as off post. And so obviously we had the breakout of the class of 27 on February 6th of this year. That was after the election of that class back in August 19th. They went through the normal events that occur as a part of the RAT line, planned, resourced, executed through the coordination of the first class. So they take ownership of it as they always have. I think the unique aspect of this that I would point out is class of 24 in the role of leadership in terms of navigating this now class through the activities. Class of 24 was the COVID class. So their RAT line was significantly curtailed. And so there was a lot of coaching and mentoring that had to go on to just kind of ensure that they instituted a good, tough RAT line. I talk about two things when people ask about, okay, what's different about how the class is leading today and perhaps in my day. And I refer to them as the two Ps: do things with purpose and do things professionally. And the class and the class leadership that I talked to, both in terms of the first class leaders, the regimental commander and the Honor Corps president, have embraced that, making sure that as they communicate and talk to the subordinate class leaders as well as the members of their class, that they understand that those are the things that are important in terms of how we continue to navigate the normal challenges of the Institute. The Commandant's going to be prepared to talk more about that. We also very good turnout with the legislative reception. You see in the picture, we had the Lieutenant Governor, Winsome Sears. She was in attendance. Had a number of key legislators that attended as well. We had Speaker of the House, Delegate Scott was in attendance, Delegate Terry Austin, Delegate Ellen Campbell, and had a great opportunity for them to engage and talk to and listen to cadets. We also gave the cadets, as we resumed for the second year, an opportunity to go up on up to the legislators and just observe some of the work that they do. They got a great introduction from VMI's now current Senator alum Jennifer Carroll Ford, class of 03, who was in attendance as well. So a great event there. Midwinter formals, obviously those things are some of those opportunities for cadets to just kind of unwind, spend time with one another, get together. Inclusive excellence, and Brianna will talk about this during her committee. We had probably two events that culminated this year's cycle of inclusive excellence. The first was we had as the keynote speaker to the first class, former Assistant Secretary of the Army for Research, Development, and Acquisition, Ms. Stephanie Easter. And she brought her perspective and her many years of experience, both working with the Department of the Army and being a senior political appointee for the Department of the Navy. And she brought her perspective of as you go into organizations such as the Department of Defense, what diversity looks like and the value of diversity and what people bring from diverse backgrounds and why it's so very important to the United States military. The dean could talk about Honors Week. I have the opportunity, although I didn't have the opportunity this year to actually get around to the classroom setting, I have the opportunity to listen online to the many great efforts that are going on by cadets as a part of their honors theses that are going, and those were very well done. Spring furlough, our chaplain for, I think, the second or third year in a row, took a group of cadets to Kentucky, an area that was ravaged by tornadoes, and partnered with a group that is working to kind of rebuild that area. And again, many other efforts went on as well between those activities in spring break, but it really gives our cadets an opportunity, number one, to represent the Institute, but also to be part of being just good citizen leaders, citizen soldiers working in a community to help them restore some of the things that they lost through devastation. And then for the second year in a row, almost a year from the day he was here before, Governor Youngkin came to post. This time he had an opportunity, I think for the first time since his inaugural, to see a parade. Had a number of other VIPs. Secretary of Education was with him. The Secretary of Travis Voiles, Dallas, what's he? Secretary of Resources. He was here as well, because this was also an opportunity for the governor to give a keynote message to the Environment Virginia Conference, which I think we're hosting for about our 34th year. And then we had a retirement parade most recently for members of our faculty and staff who will be heading off into retirement this year. In addition to that, we had a great a great parade in honor of Senator Tommy Norman, also retired from the Senate after so many years. So those are some of the many things that have happened this year on our first chart. I think if we could go to the next chart, pull up something quick. The first is just a highlight of a partnership that we have begun. We began to work here 2 years ago with the Department of the Army's Army Research Lab. So the Army has a number of research labs and in research development and engineering centers as a part of their enterprise. And we have had the opportunity to partner with them, kind of show them some of the capabilities, demonstrate to them a keen interest among our cadets for possible internships. And so we recently signed about 2 weeks ago, myself and the director of Army Research Lab, Dr. Pat Baker, we signed an articulation agreement. And what this does is it gives us an opportunity to send some of our students to paid internships where they go and they work not only in the Army's labs, but they also get an opportunity to see what the Army does in field research. And so last year, I know we sent one of our cadets out to White Sands Missile Range. So they were out in the desert and hanging out there and learning what the Army does in terms of research and experimentation. And so last year we had 8 cadets that ended up going and doing these internships. And this year, it looks like we're going to have between 6 and 8. Another component of that agreement allows us to send one of our faculty up to the Army Research Lab headquarters in Beltsville, Maryland, and spend about 10 weeks working with some of the other lab scientists on various different efforts that they're working to get after Army problems that might affect mobility, lethality, or survivability for our forces. And they have an opportunity to work with them on that. In addition to that effort, we are also working another partnership with NATO, which will also again create internship opportunities, but it will give some cadets an opportunity to go and work with a NATO element through wargaming efforts that they're doing. A lot of times I think this is fairly appealing to our international studies students. However, any cadet can apply. Navy ROTC as a part of our field training exercise week that had many activities going on as well. This year, it's been recognized that our Navy ROTC is the 3rd largest ROTC program when you look across the ROTC programs within the country, our Navy ROTC and Marine detachment is the #1 producer of Marine second lieutenants, the #2 producer of Navy ensigns behind Texas A&M, and the #4 ROTC detachment in terms of 4-year scholarships. We're #1 when it comes to 3- and 2-year scholarships, and we have the second lowest attrition for 4-year scholarship window. So all of that is a testament to the great program that's being run down there.
I guess I didn't put your seat assignment there just so you could make the grand entrance. I apologize. I should have moved it back a bit.
Expecting it.
I just talked about entrepreneur. Well, I did not talk about entrepreneurs. So this year we've kicked off a program that my understanding existed here a while back, and somehow it's languished. And so with the work of the dean and the work of one of our faculty, Colonel Cliff West, we have resumed a summer entrepreneurship program that will kick off this summer. Any major is eligible to participate in the program. 6 to 8 cadets who will spend the summer learning about, hearing from thought leaders in this particular space about being entrepreneurs, being budding entrepreneurs, if you will. We had the opportunity to dedicate Lemoore Field. I don't know if you all have had a chance to drive by Gray Minor Stadium and look at the new field down there. This gives you kind of a high visual view from probably some type of high level view. I recommend if you have time to just go down there and take a look. It really has transformed that field where it really looks brand new. And I will tell you that it's a big win for our cadet athletes who are baseball players. I recall briefing this board about some of the things that I'd learned when I got here, where with the old field, oftentimes what would happen is our cadet athletes would play the game, and then they'd spend about 60 to 90 minutes after the game restoring the field, right? Which takes away from study time. It takes away from other activities that they could be participating part of the Corps. And so Mike Lemoore, who's class of 1985, was generous enough to provide a gift that funded the majority of this effort. He worked with Andrew Deal, and he worked with Dallas Clark and his team to make that a reality. And so we did the dedication of Lemoore Field here back a few weeks ago when we played the Citadel. And oh, by the way, we beat the Citadel 2-3. So
Very important.
A lot of wins going on against the Citadel this year. Alumni visits. We've had a number of alumni visits. Last week with classes 84, the honored class of 1974, and then class of 2004 and 2014. Well attended. I had the opportunity and the privilege of speaking to the class of 1984 during their dinner gathering, and I had the opportunity to speak to the class of 74 during their gathering. The class of 74 was generous enough to present a check to the Institute for about $8.8 million. So that's their commitments as well as their actual giving that took place in that effort. The next shows are the new member of our staff on our chaplain staff. So John Casper, our chaplain, he's completed 2 weeks of his training, and he's taken possession or control of our new facility dog titled named CAVU. I don't know what CAVU means, but I'm sure.
Ceiling and visibility unlimited.
Say again?
Ceiling and visibility unlimited.
Oh, okay. Matter of fact, CAVU is in the back of the room there.
Sir.
So we're going.
Hey.
We're gonna figure out whether we get stripes or stars on him. I assume he'll be off and running and doing good things. And then Spring FTX, where we have an opportunity to not only have those commissioning cadets do some things in their profession in terms of field training and exercise, but non-commissioning cadets have an opportunity to do work alongside of each other during the period. And then the last thing I'll highlight is through the efforts of a number of people, but led by our Chief Diversity Officer, Brianna Williams, we coordinated and brought to post the VMFA, so the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts Artmobile. And it has a collection in it that tells a story of just kind of the impact of artwork. It was here. It gave us an opportunity to not only open this up to the cadet corps and faculty and staff, but also young people from the surrounding communities and middle schools and high schools so that they had an opportunity to tour the Artmobile. It also gives them an opportunity to come to post. And so young people around this community who may have never seen this post have no idea what's on here and how our Corps of Cadets represents itself. It gave them an opportunity to see them and to be able to interact with folks. So how many total folks did we have, Brianna? Are you here? She's not here. She will most certainly talk about this during the Inclusive Excellence Subcommittee meeting. And so with that, I want to go to another topic. And I briefed the XCOM yesterday about where we are on the two primary searches, but there's a third search that's shown on this chart that I'll talk a little bit about as well. And so those searches are for the Director of Athletics and the Commandant. And we are well into the process for both of those searches. We started out for the Director of Athletics. We started out with a candidate pool of 17 candidates. And if you recall, I mentioned that we were going to use a search firm and we contracted out with a search firm that specializes in AD searches, head coach searches to help us with that effort. Also, he was formed, being led by Colonel Jay Johnson, who's a member of our faculty. Pretty good size committee, but everyone is there to kind of represent the interests of the institute in the various different parts and sectors of the institute. So we started out with 17 candidates and through a review, just kind of looking at CVs and looking at the packages that were sent for, we narrowed that down to 6 of what was believed to be the strongest set of candidates among that 17. There was also some back and forth between the search firm and those potential candidates to gauge their real interest. So a couple dropped out, pulled their name out of consideration. 1 6 that went through the team's interview was an associate commissioner from a Big 5 school, who also happened to be a female candidate. I only mentioned that to highlight that the candidate pool, both in terms of the total number of 7 and even the narrower version of 6, was highly diversified, highly diverse, I should say. And it gave the committee an opportunity to really just kind of get themselves together and really ask some good questions to narrow that list of 6 down to 3 finalists. Yesterday, one of those finalists was on post, spent the evening before and all day yesterday interviewing with various different members of the faculty and the staff and the cadet corps. Had opportunity to speak with the coaches, I believe, in total, and also had the opportunity to engage with 2 of our head coaches, Danny Rocco and Andrew Wilson. And so we'll have the other 2 candidates here over the next couple of weeks. I think the last interview occurs somewhere between now and graduation. And I believe we're on track between now and before the end of May to make a determination on who is going to be our next athletic director.
So just to remind everybody too, you appointed a board representative to that particular committee, actually.
Correct.
Damon, I think you've been part of that process. I don't know if you have anything you want to share, because I think it's, the process has been, quite accelerated, but
A wealth of great candidates. I think the three that ones that General was speaking to interview, bringing, excellent candidates that we have come to post experience on both ends of for the military experience and then the athletic experience outside of the military environment. So each of these candidates, whoever we choose, I think would be the right choice to take our institute forward athletically and move on with the vision with that. So a great pool, a great experience myself.
All three of the finalists have some degree of background or experience at military colleges. I'll add that as well. With respect to the commandant search, we also had a pretty significant initial pool of candidates, 17 as well. 15 of those were men and the other 2 were women. 16 of the 17 were service veterans, ranging from the rank of 04 to 06. A number of them were former 05 and 06 level commanders. 14 of the 17 were VMI alum in terms of who applied for the position. That number, just based on a review of, again, their CVs, their background, it was determined that 9 of the 17 should move forward in a series of online interviews. That effort is being led again by a smaller group, but being led by Pat Looney. Pat is doing an extremely good job in terms of coming in and updating me on where we stand. And of those 9 candidates, early this week, Pat came in and laid out for me the committee's recommendation of 5 of those candidates to be considered as finalists. And so I'm in the process of reviewing the work that Pat presented to me to make a determination on whether or not we will bring all 5 in or bring a smaller number of that group in as finalists to do in-person interviews. We've got that all set up. Among the 5, they're all among the best qualified. And there's no doubt that we have the ability to pick a high quality individual who's going to be our next commandant. Among the 6, all services are represented. We have representation from the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and the Marine Corps among those finalists.
So actually similar, you'd put a board member on that search committee, Jim Joustra. Jim, I don't know if you want to offer.
Yeah, I'd like to. I got to tell you, it was really a great privilege to be part of that committee. There were like 14 people on the committee. I think Pat Looney did just an outstanding job structuring the process and ensuring consistency. We came up with initially 26 questions, and then we boiled that down to 13. Every committee member initially contributing a couple of questions, and the pool of candidates that we talked to were just highly impressive. All of them. You get done talking to these people and learning about their experiences, and it gives you confidence in this country because every one of them is a great American, amazing patriots. And the final 6, we've got General Wins has got some fantastic candidates to choose from, and I believe any one of them would succeed and do well for us in the commandant. But it was interesting to watch the different disciplines. We had like 14, different areas from HR to the IG to across the board, athletics, academics, and we didn't all agree on everything, but it was very civil discourse and discussion, and the synergy was very impressive. It was a great experience.
Thank you and Damon for participating. I know it took some time, but well value. fact that the two of you were at the table. So thank you. Cedric.
And then finally, we have a new director for communications and marketing, which is currently being held down by our acting director, who's to my left over there. So, who's doing a superb job. As a result of this, obviously, with Bill Wyatt fleeting up to be my exec, that creates an opening. It's an important position because of a lot of the work that is ongoing right now in terms of our marketing and outreach, both to highlight many of the things that are going on here within the Cadet Corps, going on here at VMI, but also as we gear up for the rollout of the strategic plan and how we're going to communicate that and how we're going to market that effort. We're going to have the right person in to be able to lead that effort. And so that is an ongoing search. I think we have a called down list of candidates. In-person interviews are starting to occur, if I'm correct. Okay, all right. And so with that, I will.
Sorry, General,
Yeah.
any of those candidates for the communications position alumni? No applicants.
Yep. Okay, that concludes my portion of my briefing for the moment. What I'd like to do next is turn it over to Shannon Escom and Joe Hagee to come up and give you an idea of where we are and the many things that have been happening here over the year that relate to our strategic enrollment management efforts. Okay. Anyone have any questions for me before I turn it over to Joe and Shannon? Okay.
And as they're coming up, Bill, these slides will be posted.
They are posted in the portal right now.
Right now. Okay, great.
Good morning. Just a few updates. I'm not going to read these verbatim because you will have them. I just want to touch on the highlights because I'm sure you have more questions about where we're at with everything else. Some of the big things for financial aid or not, we're going to talk about later, but our Title IV recertification, that's from the Department of Education that said we can continue to award federal aid to students. That was renewed and approved through 2029. Admissions, our work is just continuing as it should be. And then the Pell Grant is now the Pell Initiative grant from Chev. We submitted our April report for that, waiting for some more guidance. We'll have a meeting, or I'll have a meeting with Dr. Simmons here within the next couple of weeks. And then across post, just working on retention initiatives, retention software, evaluating that. STP is right around the corner, and then so is matriculation. So there's just a lot of coordination going on between admissions and financial aid, and then getting ready for the next recruitment cycle. And with that, I'm going to give Joe plenty of time for admission. Turn it over.
Appreciate it.
Janet, have the federal financial aid, a lot of press on that, and it's.
I have some slides for you, and we'll talk about that.
What's going on with the FAFSA? I don't know.
Wall Street Journal every day.
Yeah, right.
No one knows what's going on.
Yeah, very good answer.
Good morning, everyone. This is typically a slide I like to end my brief with, but I want to lead with it this morning, just to kind of show you the 5-year projection with where we started last year and where we're looking to go with the class of 2031. So I revised some of the projections, not related to the number of matriculants, but ultimately to the number of applications as we've learned and we see things change throughout this cycle, knowing that we can maybe shoot a little bit higher with applications, but that rate of growth maybe not climbing as high as we enter into the first enrollment cliff with that declining birth rate during the Great Recession in 2028. That is not expected to reverse itself until 2037 or VMI's class of 2041. There's a second looming enrollment cliff as well as individuals and families become more consumer minded, looking at return on investment. I'm sure you've heard a lot of that in the news, whether what side of the fence you're on, it really doesn't matter with student loan debt. We see many families now asking questions about return on investment. What am I going to get? And so we're seeing less college age students looking to go to college and then looking at alternative options. So we're tracking that. So we had to make some revised projections, as you see here. Next slide, please. All right, so where we currently stand as of 26 April, I'm going to give you updated numbers as of yesterday morning. I don't want to go over everything, but I want to hit some of the highlights. So with increase, so hand raisers, so individuals that said they're interested in VMI, they want to learn more. Last year, at this point in time, we're at 13,000 and some change, and we're at 17,370. So it's about a 32% increase, which I think is excellent. The second thing I want to point out are the number of submitted applications. So these are applications that are complete, certified, submitted, and actionable. At this point in time, last year, we were at 1,175, and we're actually at 2,044. So within a week, we jumped another 20 applications, which is unusual at this part of the admissions cycle, but we're still getting in quality apps every day. That is a 72% increase. To put that into perspective and how chaotic this year is, FAFSA aside, all the literature and the research out there, the impact of the common application on four-year public institutions of higher education. Typically see a 12% increase in year one, that increases to 25% over a decade. We're at 72%. West Point also joined the Common App this year. They anticipated over a 10-year period, a 43% increase in applications. Citadel implemented last year saw a 28% increase in applications. So the VMI value proposition is strong. We're getting the word out, and we're seeing the results in the number of applicants that we're receiving. The last thing, deposits. Right now, as of yesterday, the day after the deposit deadline, 453. So that's about a 10% increase point in time over last year, where we were at 438 on May 2nd. We're tracking about 35 to 41 athletes that still need to deposit, or RAT athletes that still need to deposit. And we know that we have a rolling 3-year average of deposits paid after May 1 of about 56. So needless to say, we're in a very good position to be able to hit our target of 495. I'll talk a little bit later on about things that are happening nationwide where we feel our enrollment marketing firm, Smart 451 feels, my colleagues feel that folks are going to see a bump in deposits later than they typically do because of what's happening nationally.
Yeah, with the Common App and some other things, it's hard to look at one period of ours versus today, for example, isn't it? But it sounds like you've got some benchmarks outside of us that you can use actually to get a sense as to, have a bit better clarity on what some of these new things mean and how good is interpreting.
Right. Yes, sir. In many ways, we wanted this year to be a benchmark year, right. And I think we're still looking at it as such. But when you factor in happening nationally, it's going to take another year probably to fully understand, the landscape and the environment that we're in and how do we adjust. But we're doing that on a day-to-day basis. All right. Real quick, the appointed student profile. So just some things to run through. Right now, the appointed student GPA is a 3.76 with the academic GPA, so unweighted, that's at 3.43. Average class rank, that is top 31%. The breakdown in terms of majors for appointed students, 44% liberal arts, 30% engineering, and STEM minus the E is 26%. The average VMI ranking is 29.2 out of 46. So a little caveat there. That score is more or less the same as last year. And so you see a incoming class or an appointed class that academically looks a little bit stronger. And so what we're seeing, and this is one of these things that we're learning about the Common App, is while, yes, they're stronger academically, there are a lot of things that we include in our evaluative process, that holistic review, that they're not including on the application, such as extracurricular activities, athletics, right? Those questions are optional. And so we go back and we follow up and say, hey, we want to learn more about you before we render a decision. So while we see them gaining ground with points for their academic abilities, we see them losing some points, which is why it's more or less level as compared to this time last year. You can see the average standardized test scores there with the percent reporting. What I think is interesting, I think this makes our math faculty happy and our engineering faculty happy as well. The percent overall of our incoming, our appointed students that have taken calculus is 31%, 31%. Last year, that was 21%. The percent of STEM students in STEM majors that were appointed that have taken calculus is 39%. And last year, that was 29%. Next slide. Not a lot to say, just as we track student demand, since we don't necessarily have an undeclared track at VMI or an undeclared major. So here are the applications that students have applied, or the majors that students have applied to based on their application. You kind of see that breakdown. Cancellation data. So I think this is important. This is, how we learn. If the folks decide not to come here, we want to understand why so that we can shift, we can adjust, we can hopefully improve. So right now, cancel before deposit, we have 174. Cancel after deposit, we have 6, and cancel after reservation, we have 6 as well. That cancel after reservation was a little bit higher than it typically is at this point in the cycle, but you can see the reasons below. We have individuals that have decided that they want to enlist for the guard route. They're deferring to next year. And we obviously have individuals that have accepted appointments to the Federal Service Academy.
Joe, are those ranked in order?
No, sir. No, sir. I would say, generally speaking, with our cancel before deposits or our CBDs, a lot of the questions, and this is where Shannon and I are coordinating, is around financial aid. Hats off to Shannon and her team in terms of the work they did earlier on to get out all award letters, where a lot of other schools are just starting to do that, or waiting until June to do that. I think that's helped us in terms of here's what we can do. But a lot of families are saying, hey, they will openly give us their award letter from another school and say, can you match this, right? And so we have a conversation and we work that with Shannon and her team.
For example, if Norwich is saying, I'm giving you $60,000 a year for all 4 years, I can't give you 60,000, right? So there's a balance that some of them we know we can be competitive with and we coordinate that. And some of them are, I can't be that competitive with you. So let me tell you what I can do, my best offer. We'll kind of discuss helping them understand, just because they're giving you 60,000, what's their cost of attendance versus VMI's cost of attendance and what we're giving you, what's your delta out of pocket, right? So we have a lot of those conversations. The aid looks better from another school, but they don't look at the bottom line of what their out of pocket is. So I help them understand what that truly means.
Something else that's new this year. Oh, yes, ma'am.
I know it's a little bit of a wild card with the FAFSA this year, but given that a number of schools you said aren't putting out their financial aid information until June, can we expect maybe like a dip in folks that are attending when they get financial aid?
There's probably the chance that if they haven't done a FAFSA yet, well, there's two pockets. So you have a group of students who still can't complete the FAFSA or it's incomplete, and that's going to be for every school they're looking at. Those ones I think are a little bit smaller now because the Department of Ed has released, I'm going to quote them, virtually all corrections. There's still a pocket that they haven't released yet, a reprocess. You have other ones where if we're their second choice or they're their third or maybe even their first, and they get a better offer from somewhere else, there's probably an expected dip, but we're prepared for that. So we have a plan. I will tell you right now in our office, the families that are maybe on the fence, we're being very flexible with them as much as we can because they're waiting to hear from one other school. And I've asked them, don't make your decision until you get the offer and then come talk to me so that we can kind of help them, again, understand where they're at, where we're at. And it's not their fault. This is not the family's fault that they can't make a decision when they're waiting on aid offers from schools there are schools waiting to send out financial aid offers, which I don't understand how you're waiting that long, but.
And I will say, we're also fighting against what we're saying. Obviously, some of our competitors have pushed back their deposit. Biggest one in state is BT, they're 15 May, and then Citadel's 1 June, right? So we think we're going to see a bump on or around those dates. I mean, our deposit deadline was 1 May. You can still pay your deposit. We're still trying to fill out the class. We have a comp plan that's already built out, was deployed yesterday. that basically says, hey, it's not too late. We still want you to do that. So, but there's a lot of things that we're learning this year and we're gleaning from this data that we're collecting. One of those and speaks to the importance of call to duty. A lot of schools with ROTC programs that are not military colleges are offering similar scholarships to call to duty to try to make sure that they can stay competitive in this space. So I want to show you two things as a part of our senior mid-yield campaign. So with Spark 451, that's our enrollment marketing firm. The first is the results from our appointed student survey. We did our own internal one back in March, and then Spark did one back in April to understand a little bit more about, individuals that appointed, understanding their decision-making process that ultimately helps drive our strategy moving forward to seat this class as well as for next year. So broken it really down into three categories. I don't want to go over everything, but I want to highlight a few things in each category. So with respect to application data, you notice that 73% of students that we appointed applied to 7 or more schools, right? So the nature of the competitive nature of higher education is changing, right? It's a more competitive environment than ever before. Of those 73%, 46% were actually admitted to 7 or more schools, right? So longer the days where you apply to 1 or 2 or maybe 3. 80% moving over to that next category, acceptance and likelihood to enroll. 80% have VMI as their number 1 choice or in their top 3. So when we have about 700 or so appointed students left, that bodes well for us and be able to fill out the last part of our class. 1/4 of appointed students are only considering a military college. I think that's important. And then taking a look over on the right with barriers and some of the changes that we've made to address access to applying. We had 17% of respondents say that they would not have applied if we had assessed the application fee of $40. So that's a potential loss of 349 to 748 applications if you factor in the 19% that said that they were unsure if they would apply, right? 17% would not have applied if VMI wasn't on the Common App. 14% were unsure. So again, that's a potential loss of 349 to 636 applications.
You elaborate on the last one in the center column. State.
Yes. So in terms of not necessarily that they would or they wouldn't attend, right? Not giving an answer one way or the other, but saying that cost to attend, and my assumption is it's primarily out-of-state students, cost to attend was a primary factor in their enrollment decision.
And if you look at the timing of those surveys, it's important to know that we did one in March, trying to gauge when FAFSA, we were just now getting FAFSA applications in and we were gauging them. They're waiting for the FAFSA to help determine and make that decision. And so, of course, if FAFSA doesn't send anything to schools until the end of March, and we sent out a survey saying, have you done, because we wanted to know, have you done your FAFSA yet? Are you waiting? Did you try and you have issues? Because we were trying to gauge who was in our applicant pool and where they were at. And then what are your concerns? And it comes in, but well, cost is going to be a concern if the FAFSA doesn't come in, or if I'm not getting anything from the FAFSA or from the school. So it's kind of a catch-all bucket.
Right. Other factors as well, as you can see on a scale of 1 to 5, what's the average score for folks looking for an ROTC program, military lifestyle, major options, also tests.
It was probe a little on that 61% visited opposed. Do we have any instances to those that visit opposed? What percentage actually get their application approved and ultimately matriculate?
It's in the, let's say, don't quote me on this, it's in the upper 60s. So, yeah.
Very important to the decision of
Yeah.
an individual ultimately show up at the gates.
Yes, sir. Okay. So this is a quick little 2-minute video of our appointed student microsite. So this is something that we're doing this year with our appointed students. They have a personalized web page. We drive them through a series of text messages, emails, postcards, as well as their parents to log into this personalized site to basically make sure that they know all their next steps. They learn about cadet life here at VMI, learn a little bit more about the Lexington area and things of that nature. Bear Scout site. site is heavily utilized. As approximately 88% of the students are actively taking the platform. Once logged in, students are directed to their home page. You see a call to action button. This button directs you to the very next step. Which is based on their status of the efficiency. Put the academic player section and see the courses that take throughout their time in that shift based on their grade. Switching to another major, the drop down feature, select another major, see what courses they would take if they decided to switch. The anchor section is a great resource. It talks about the same careers, work setting, skills and development. Institute related to the major, as well as salary expectations for the information provided by players. Vocation Explorer is a good resource for individuals that may be unfamiliar with the Lexington Rockbridge area. Students and their families can learn more about restaurants, hotels, shops downtown, places of worship, etc. in the Lexington Rockbridge area. Finally, the last section, which is probably the most viewed section of the Barracks Boundary Resource, is the cadet life section. Here, appointed students and their families hear from current cadets of the Corps, recent graduates, and see important information related to matriculation in the Institute as a whole. So, great resource, heavily utilized. About 88% of users, which is great. When talking with Spark 451, they do this for other colleges that they work with. They're typically in the upper 60s, low 70s. So the fact that we have almost 90% of appointed students engaged in the platform is fantastic. All right, last slide for me before I turn it back over to Shannon is just, so what does this all mean in terms of matriculants? And so we know that, going back to the publicly available data, impact of the Common App on four-year public institutions, while you see an increase in applications, you typically see a decrease in yield, and those tend to follow each other, right? Looking at where we're currently at, we're at about 1,400 appointments, so we're within that range. We're looking to land somewhere between 499 and 527, so we're in a good position to hit our target of 495. I do want to talk a little bit about the wait list. So we did not have a wait list last year. It is something that we're proud of. It says, top quality of the applicant pool. We currently have 236 on our wait list. We've been working that wait list now for a few weeks, looking at needs that we have to try to fill majors, the quality of the applicant or those that are on the wait list. And so we've been working that pretty hard. We sent out a survey in late February, gauging the interest of students that we put on the wait list of whether or not they wanted to remain. And so out of the 178 that responded, 140 said that they wanted to remain on the wait list, and for many, VMI was their number one choice. This is the sole reason why we decided not to push back our deposit deadline to 15 May or 1 June. Because if we had, we were concerned that we would lose the 140 that responded yes. We were afraid we were going to lose them, right? So we've worked really hard to keep them engaged over the last few months, and we're starting to work that wait list pretty hard. Okay. Real quick, Michelle, can you go back one slide?
495 is the max we're going to take.
Yes, sir. That's the goal.
Okay.
Yes, sir. That's the goal. Based on
What is our max number that we be willing to take?
whatever the number the superintendent gives me.
We've looked at capacity, Terry, from various different areas. I think 530, somewhere between 536 and 539 is probably max capacity when it comes to barracks. But I've also had Dallas take a look at and kind of describe for me from the standpoint of what it does to resources, what it would take, and also ask the dean to take a look at it in terms of classrooms. what it would take. All those numbers come in about in the same range. So I would say somewhere between 536, 539 is about what we would have as a max capacity
So I will say,
for a rack class.
so going back to the Citadel, right, and looking at their data, because that's really sort of a set of data that we can look at to make predictions about where we're going to land there as senior military college. While their applications increased 28%, their yield decreased, I think, 22%. The number, their acceptance rates more or less stayed the same. So last year we ended the cycle at an acceptance rate of 81%. Right now we're trending at about 68.5. And so our hope is that we'll end the cycle below 70. And it will, every year we'll continue to bring that down and get back to more historic norms. So.
I think, one thing I'd highlight about just kind of some of the great work that this team is doing is probably about a year ago, and there's always been an ongoing discussion and examination of what it would take to kind of improve our stance and a demonstration of the agility that we didn't have coming out of COVID that we needed to have. And it's really a reflection of what Joe has been briefing and what Shannon has been briefing in that the team now, along with contracted partners, along with the marketing efforts that are going on, really have demonstrated an ability to be very, very agile in this particular space when it comes to how you recruit students. I think the highlight of the fact that of those much higher numbers of appointments, the fact that we are in a position now where if our yield is much lower than our traditional yield, with all the things going on with financial considerations, so on and so forth, we will still be in very good shape in terms of the appointed class. We'll meet our number and we'll do it. That wasn't present if you go back to 2012 up to around 2023. We were steadily seeing, as we went back through the study that I briefed you on about a year ago, we were steadily seeing a decline in our applicant pool. And over that time period, it was a 40% decline when you get to 2023, I believe. And if you account for the period just before the significantly low number that we received of the 375, it was 20%. It's about 20% decline in our applicant pool. So their focus and their efforts have really done a lot to, number one, put us in a better position going after a good young people, the partnerships that they've established, not only with the dean's office and the faculty and the department heads, but also our ROTC detachments, our head coaches and our assistant coaches in the athletic space is kind of the perfect exemplar of what we talk about when we talk about this whole thing of the strategic enrollment management.
Joe, just one question. You may have answered it. How do most applicants find out about VMI?
Great question. Typically, well, through recruiting events, through purchase name sources. So that 17,000 number and some change earlier. That's going to be a mixture of names that we've purchased through various sources that have engaged with our marketing effort, or young people that we've met at recruiting events.
That's something you survey?
We do. We track it. We do.
I heard someplace that parents were a huge factor in.
So we do, as a part of our enrollment marketing efforts within the admissions office, we do something with Smart Force, where we take a look at various sources, including information available from the credit agencies to match parent data with student data. So we can, if it's not given to us when they enter the funnel as an inquiry or a hand raiser, we're able to use those various sources to match up the parent data, and we use that to communicate with them as well. So I'm not going to say every communication that goes to a student goes to their parents or their guardian, but more often than not, it does.
I don't want to take up too much time, but, and first of all, great job. This is all super exciting, a lot of great information. I noticed, you've been sending these numbers, weekly, and I noticed that on inquiries, it's about equal male and female, and when it comes to applicants, it's about 24% female to 75%. And when we come to coming here, it's down to 15%. And I'm wondering, are there efforts to, increase that, number or percentage of female applicants, particularly given the enrollment clip?
Yeah, absolutely. I think throughout those various stages in the funnel, we've seen an increase in female applicants. So whereas when you look at applications submitted, 22% are females. That was 17, 16 or 17, 18% last year. Conditional appointments, 21% of appointments given for females. And so just throughout that attrition in the funnel, we see that scale down. But I think we ended last year with about 14% of the class of 2027 being female, and we're tracking right now at about 70%. So we've lost some really good female appointed students recently to appointments to the service academies and whatnot. So, but yes, definitely we continue to outreach. We continue to attend events that specifically focus on high performing female potential cadets. So.
Yeah, just echoing that. I mean, it is obvious the amount of effort you all put into this, and great work. And y'all are also a great team, by the way. This may not be a question for you. It may be for General Mareshi, or maybe for. I'm just interested because I'm living through college searches again in my life. Sounds like a lot of schools are bringing the SAT back. That seems to be a vibe I'm getting out on the road with my son. I just wonder if at some point maybe we ought to just talk about that.
Sure. Nationally, the number of schools requiring SAT scores, I think, isn't necessarily increasing. I think there are some important schools or prominent schools that are bringing it back with a little caveat. So some of the Ivy League schools, I think 2 have become permanently test optional, whereas 2 have brought back standardized testing with the caveat that you can now submit an AP score instead of the SAT or ACT, which makes that it's a little bit more accessible, right? So I would say, I think we had an ad hoc committee that was formed and made a formal recommendation to the dean. And I believe that recommendation was to, I'll let the dean talk a little bit more about it, but to sort of assess over the next 2-3 years, looking at the data and ultimately make a decision. What I can say is I would tend to think it would be a barrier. A lot of the literature and the research says that it can be a barrier, especially for students of color and students from other underserved and underrepresented populations. I would point to our competitors, those that we directly compete with, in-state, other senior military colleges, ultimately making a decision on whether or not we would want to bring that.
And are they all still, at this point, they're all still test optional?
Correct. And some are permanently test optional as well.
Okay.
I think one of the academies is still operating under COVID guidelines where you can apply and not submit standardized testing.
Joe, do you have data on the number of those interested First Touch that want to seek a commission? Number one. Number two, data on applicant candidates we may lose just because they think they have to take a vote, or they just pass on.
Not the latter, but I do know, at least with those that have applied, about now in terms of First Touch, once they enter the funnel, not necessarily, but those that applied, about 64 to 68%, it varies, say that they're seeking a commission. We have about 10 to 15% that say that they're unsure. Very small percentage says that they're not. So.
I'm sorry, I hate to bring up another one, but I think this is important. When you go back to the survey list for like why you have chosen VMI, and there's people who are like, okay, I want an ROTC scholarship. I didn't see athletics in there, and I assume we have a lot of people who come here because they want to play Division I sports. Did you not poll them, or did it just so happen that it wasn't? I just didn't see that already.
Athletics was an option, yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was every student that was in appointed status at the time of the survey. So we didn't, exclude certain groups from the survey. Those were just top reasons.
When you think about your ability to bring in a class, how important is athletics as a component of that to you?
Extremely. We're talking about a third of the RAC class every year. The other questions?
Before we hop into the confusing. Okay, so from high level, we all know, if you paid attention to the news this morning, West Virginia governor, they declared a state of emergency on the FAFSA, and they're actually eliminating the FAFSA for their state aid at this point. So that came out this morning. That tells you West Virginia is down 40% in FAFSA filing rates. And so they're a little bit worse off than the national average, worse off than Virginia. And so this is kind of where we're at right now. So the FAFSA application itself has improved for the student experience. I'm going to say that with a caveat. It is easier for the student to complete it if they don't run into the 12 other issues behind it, right? If they don't have a social security number issue, if everything works perfect, the FAFSA rehaul of the application itself, it worked and it made it easier for families. So that's a win. We'll take that. The challenge is everything else is still all just a mess. So to give you an idea, as of yesterday, the Department of Education made the announcement that they reprocess all the FAFSA, but words are hard, impacted by IRS tax data coming in incorrectly, missing signatures. The Social Security issue was just resolved this week. The problem is that virtually, right? So there is still a group of people across the country that can't complete the FAFSA, can't get into the FAFSA, or whatever is coming over is skewing some results. Now, in our analysis of what we're seeing at VMI, we're not impacted that much by that. We're talking a very small group that are probably impacted by that. But when I talked to the Department of Education yesterday, what we've awarded them isn't going to change based off of what changes, right? So I feel very confident in where we're at for VMI. We are down, VMI and Virginia were down about the same amount. Now, the problem with being down in FAFSA completion rates is we have a huge group of the returning core that haven't done it, and they typically don't do it until the summer, or they like to wait until the first week of August. So that is a really hard number to quantify because there's so many reprocessed FAFSAs coming in. So that is my best guess, is that we're down about the same statewide. What tells me that we're sitting in a good position, though, even with where we're at with enrollment, is that if families are freaking out about their financial aid and they haven't heard, they're calling us, and those numbers are very small. And so we're talking a handful of families that are freaking out about their FAFSA not coming in. That tells me that we're right on track with where we should be. So as of May 1st, we received over 2,200 FAFSA applications, and that includes all duplicates and reprocessed. Okay, so that could be the Department of Education resent it to us. It could be the student changed their phone number and it resends to us. You can't really break that out into the reasons why. But that number is true for where we were at last year at the end of the entire cycle, which would include summer, of 3,200. So really, we're okay. You have to consider, I probably have more than half of the current core that has not done their FAFSA yet. When you figure that into those numbers, I feel very, very good with where we're at. So this is the timeline we've talked about historically. Joe has sat on admissions briefs across the state. I have gone to a conference with all financial aid administrators across the state, national meetings and discussions about this, and VMI is ahead of the pack. We were ahead of the pack in getting aid offers out, how we communicated to families on what they needed, what was missing, issues that we were seeing. So the best way I could think about to explain this was a wave approach. Okay, so the first wave was really focusing on those that were incoming from the RAT class that had no errors. They weren't going to be reprocessed. There was nothing that I could see that was glaring on it. And we said, okay, good, we're getting it out to you. And we did. And then the second wave is those that have been reprocessed. And so the majority of those reprocessed happened early April, and we got all of that information out. And now, of course, the Department of Ed is sending us hundreds a day, which is very exciting. And we get more to reprocess right now. When I'm looking at what's coming in, though, it's net, it's the same. So I awarded them based off of this transaction. Department of Ed changed it. It didn't change the number. So that is a good thing. It's changing and they're updating it and we're compliant, but I'm not seeing a huge thing in that number. And then the third wave are those with right now that are coming in that I just said from the Department of Education. And in between all of that, we're working on the returning. My primary concern for the returning core are those that are going to lose aid eligibility because the math changed on the FAFSA. So if they have somebody in the core right now that has a sibling in college, they lost that benefit, right? So the number in college doesn't help them anymore. And so those are the ones that I'm working on and trying to get that out to them so that they have the summer to work with me to help figure out a plan for repayment and get them back here in the fall. So part of that communication, the minute we received the FAFSAs, we were telling families what was going on. And we were very clear. I was very blunt that the Department of Education, because of this issue, because of that issue, I wanted them to know this was not a VMI thing. This is a nationwide issue that's impacting everybody. And so we were telling them, you didn't sign your FAFSA. It's not open yet. It should open here. Go do it. And we would send out another communication. And we were constantly reminding them of what was missing, what needed to be done. And that way they knew. So when it opened for them or they called, we were getting it within a couple of days once they were able to make their corrections. So a lot of work has been done. Joe's team has been amazing in helping just get us survey and pulse results out to our applicant pool to see where they're at in the FAFSA process, but I feel very confident with where VMI is. Okay, so this just breaks it down. So we brought in our first group FAFSAs on March 22nd, and then you can see through 5/1. So the big thing is if you're comparing numbers, the rejected, they rejected from the Department of Ed because of a missing signature or other issue that we knew was going to happen because the FAFSA is a mess, okay? The SAR-C flags are usually, that's Social Security couldn't confirm that they're a US citizen. They have an issue with their Social Security number in general, something like that. So the reject numbers compared to this point in time last year is higher, and that's to be expected because of all of the FAFSA complications. But the big ones with the Social Security, the SAR-C column of 33, we had 30 last year. So really that part is okay. And we were not unexpecting the rejects because we knew there were so many issues. Wow. And then call to duty. So we are really at capacity of call to duty for the class of 28. 288 total applications, that's unduplicated, that have come in. And we have made 99 awards. And so the breakdown is up there for you with where we're at. And then the comparison of where we were this time last year for the class of 27 and where we're at right now. Other than that, I have questions, yes.
Shannon, as head of the finance committee, I hope I can get away with asking this very blunt financial question. If we award this to an in-state student or an out-of-state student versus in-state, it means the federal government's paying us $30,000 more per student coming in. Does that weigh into the decision making? We
rate heavier on in-state versus out-of-state? We don't at this point, no. So the intent with where we're awarding right now is to award it to anybody regardless of their in-state or out-of-state or a 3-year or a 3-year, but we award it after their aid, right? So if they have the Pell Grant or something, other need-based aid from the feds, we actually reduce the call to duty that we're awarding. We fill in the gap behind it, kind of a last dollar. But we don't make any, there's no preference given to in-state versus out-of-state.
And the awards, I assume these are all pretty darn good candidates.
They are darn good
So
candidates.
we are limited solely by what we're able to put.
Correct. I will tell you, everyone who could be awarded is awarded. So there was it last week, Phil, that I had a wait list? Last week I had a wait list. We had under 7. I'm going to say 7, but I can't remember exactly. And just between people getting their academy appointments or that's really the primary of them, they got academy appointments. We dropped down to 9. So they are, I mean, they're great candidates coming in.
So we're not leaving, I'm trying to think how, I'm probably not framing.
We're not falling short.
Right, we're not leaving anything on the field. Every kid who we got a shot at, we're doing it.
If they are eligible and they have submitted, they are awarded because I'm under that 100. This will continue to shift just like it did last year. It'll continue to go down. My only concern this isn't really a concern, but it might not go down. And it might not go down because this is solid funding. If they're waiting from another school that isn't giving them a good aid package, this is gonna solidify them to VMI, right? So my caveat would be, we might not see a drop. We might have to award all 99 and pay because they're not going to decline their appointment to VMI. It's an awful problem to have a great person coming in with that. But that would be my only caution, is that we might not lose any, which would not be a bad thing. But also the retention rate for the class of 27, 97% of them are still here and receiving and pulling good grades, and
I
a
can't,
huge retention rate.
I can't remember where this came up. If it was a question or it was a conversation. It might have been on the board for that. Somebody said like, what's the best thing the board has done in the last year? And this was my answer.
Yeah.
So I would just say holistically to you guys, like I said this last year, you can fundraise on this. And I know you are, but like, we should never feel like money is an issue on this because it is such a winner for us.
Yeah.
So I just applaud you, and like, if it's a mini campaign we need to do about call to duty, I think our graduates would, if we really explain to them what this is doing, the kind of candidates we're getting, I think you would find a lot of people willing to support this. Sign me up.
There's a lot of misnomers. They don't understand that ROTC doesn't pay for everything. It doesn't. It leaves about 15,000 on the table, your room and board and your quartermaster fees. Yes, they might get a stipend to help with some of that, but I think there's a misnomer that ROTC will continue to pay all of it, and it doesn't. It leaves money, and this definitely helps with ROTC recruitment. And if you just look at the Navy numbers alone, I mean, 32. And I'll point out the 5 Air Force this year, the majority of them are J100 recipients. If you're familiar with that, the J100 scholarship, and we had to research this to figure out what it was. It'll cover their tuition and fees, just like a regular ROTC, but it also covers their room. And then Call to Duty is filling in the board part of it. So, and that's the first I've seen a J100 here at VMI.
Well, on the finance side of this, David, I'm assuming it's gonna cost us twice next year what it costs us this year, because we've got 2 classes, and then each year it'll go up. What is the status of the funding? And
well, right now, we're partnering with VMI. We're gonna do a little bit of probably some cost sharing in this next year. We just got yesterday, I think, a very nice gift to cover a lot of these. So it was $1 million.
so you anticipate being able to grow this?
Well, we're gonna have to use a lot of current income. Again, if you look at to endow this program, you're looking at about an $80 million endowment. So it's gonna be a combination of endowment and annual gifts that are gonna help push us through this.
We've anticipated the growth of the program, the long-term sustainment of it. So we've developed a framework and a plan that's a joint effort to continue the perpetuation of it. So yes, it grows and grows and grows, and it's 4 times the size than sustaining it going forward. But I think we've got a framework that gets us forward, that there's more private support. Let's shift some other resources out of it, but we've contemplated just those issues. So we've got a solid plan going forward.
You may have already done. Oh.
As you said, though, this is one of our priorities. We have a lot of things on the table right now that I think are gonna help.
Do you think the alumni, 40% of the alumni understand this program or know about it?
No,
I agree. That's my point.
no. That video you showed us in the last meeting. I mean, I'm not telling you, you guys are pros, you know, but like, I would package that video up with a tight explanation and say, we need to raise $80 million. And I would do like almost a penny thing and like, let's just do it. I know it sounds so easy for me to say that. But I just think this is like amazing for us on all fronts.
It is.
Yeah.
But point out one thing, and then I'm subject to your questions. I'll take my leave. There are some institutions that have, is it Texas A&M, Joe, that they fulfilled their capacity?
They have fulfilled their capacity with their naval ROTC program and have pushed students our way.
Our way.
So Florida State was another program as well. So
Which is unusual, but I'll take it. So,
What's our capacity in ROTC?
100, I think 100 scholarships a year is sort of the capacity. And I will say that 288 is an increase from last year unduplicated, but a little caveat to that is last year we were able to access the rejection list from some of the academies. And this year we were not able to access those. So we were communicating to everybody within our applicant pool to try to encourage them to apply for ROTC scholarships, but then also those awardee lists that we got as well. So.
And the relationship with ROTC, I mean, they're sending us their list constantly and we work the list and communicate back and let them know where we're at. And so it's just, it's an amazing, and I'm very thankful for the support for this because it is made a big difference, but that is our last slide. So if there's questions, I'm happy to turn it over.
Oh, very well.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Morning.
Good morning.
So since standardized testing came up, let me address it from academic perspective. So as Joe said, we are going to be doing some analysis over the next 2 to 3 years. So what does that mean? To me, the decision to go remain test optional or to require the test is asking the question, what is the information the test score gives us? And is that information different than what we get from all the other sources of information? So as a simple way to put it, does the SAT or ACT score help us predict success, academic success, in a way that, say, an analysis of a high school and high school GPA doesn't? So what do we learn from that? And if the correlation of predictability was identical from high school GPA and SAT, you'd say, well, why, you don't need it. You've got the high school record, so why bother? If there's information we're gathering that doesn't come from other sources, then we have to say, okay, what's that information? How important is that information to predict success? So where you've seen some other schools, as Joe mentioned, in the Ivy League, return to it. I think from what I've read, the one item that has been a focus is when you can you find a diamond in the rough from a lousy high school, right? So students that are in bad high schools, who those Ivy Leagues especially, maybe not us, that's something, that's a conversation with Shannon and Joe, but if you think about the schools, they might overlook, you think about those Ivies, they might overlook some of those types of schools. Think schools from low socioeconomic environments, all that goes with that. And it's easy to overlook those. Oh, there's no good students there. No good academic students there because lousy school and blah, blah. The SAT or ACT score, right? Imagine that. It's a lousy school, but some kid gets a 1400 SAT. And if you're an Ivy, you're going to jump on that because, oh my gosh, there's the diamond sitting in that lousy field, right? Found it. So that is not to make light of it, but that's significant, right? That the test can let a student who's in a high school or an environment that's not one that a particular college would look at because of the various factors. Say, oh, that head just popped up, right? We want to go after that student. So that's where I think the Ivies are looking. And there's some studies that suggest that that's a real thing, that you can use the test to identify a student who otherwise would be overlooked. That being said, right, when I look around the table in the room, most everyone here probably took the SAT or ACT, and the majority of us took it on a paper with a pencil. The SAT has changed. When most of you took it, if you took it before 10 years ago, the SAT used to would penalize you for a wrong answer. The scores are not comparable. SAT doesn't penalize for wrong answers, unlike the ACT, right? So if you attempt to get a wrong answer, there's no detriment to your score. And when I took the SAT, you get a penalty for a wrong answer. So it made you strategize. Do I really believe this answer, or should I leave it blank? The other thing is now with computerized testing in AI, the test has become dynamic. Meaning, this guy's taking the test and he's a super stud academically. So the questions in the second half of the test become harder because he's doing so well in the first half of the test. And this poor soul, not quite so good, right? We adjusted.
They got this reversed, actually.
So the questions in the second half of the test are dynamically adjusting for
difficulty based on the first half performance because the software can score immediately. So that's not to say not to use the test. It's to say the scores, right? We got to think about what does a 1300 mean today versus 1300 score 15 years ago. I haven't seen any studies on that. SAT, Education Testing Service, to my knowledge, hasn't released any analysis like that, but it'd be interesting to know what does it mean? So over the time as we gather success data, graduation, let's say, and academic performance, we can compare that data to when we had the test was required, pre-COVID especially, for the few years prior before the SAT changed, and then look at our predictability. And from my standpoint, if it's noise, then we can say, well, we might require the test from a marketing standpoint, but if it doesn't add to our predictability of academic success, just for marketing purposes. And if it does add, then we figure out how to put it in. And in terms of access to the test, I mean, there's lots of resources now for students who are Pell eligible, for example, to get the test paid, right? So it's not a cost factor, it's just getting them to the test. So we'll see over the next couple, 3 years. Any questions on that? Yes, sir.
Just one. And I worry about the cadet that starts out without an intention of getting a commission. And then after they're here six months, they get it, they want to pursue it. And they didn't take an SAT, so now there's no chance of getting an ROTC scholarship.
I don't know if you know more about that, Shannon. I don't know that they can't get a scholarship once they're here, even if they haven't taken the SAT or ACT.
So if it completely precludes them, I'd have to get that official.
Probably a 2-year or a 1-year.
Right.
Once there is no requirement to get one of their local scholarships. There's no SAT.
The national board that requires it, but our ROTC has a certain portion of scholarships they can award.
Okay.
So Army, for example, with a certain dollar amount, they try to,
Okay.
share amongst, and I don't.
I got that indication at the last meeting when we, in the military review we had with the department heads, ROTC, but
And maybe,
I guess we had to look.
but I think they're 1 or 2 years at that point. Someone's not going to come in the fall as a rat and suddenly get a 3.5 year.
And I'll confirm that, see if I can get a response.
Any other questions? Okay, I just have a couple slides here with just some academic comings and goings for this particular academic year. Lots of great things going on. As usual, it's kind of normal in that sense. SAC-COC accreditation, 10-year accreditation is coming up in 2027. So it's every 10 years, which is a full review. We let ourselves go naked and scrub and look everywhere. The process will start in 2025. It'll also include, because it's a 10-year, includes our quality enhancement plan. So we've got to be working on what that is. I don't have anything to tell you what that's going to be yet. And then every 5 years, there is a review, which is a lesser review, but also it's really more of a review of the quality. The previous one was the change in math for non-STEM. So that's that team of various folks from across post will assemble this upcoming academic year, and then the process will start.
SAC-COC liaison.
We race.
Better or worse.
We're better.
There was a lot of joy in that hand wave.
Yeah.
This is a monumental thing to get through, and I appreciate that y'all are starting so early and lining the teams up.
It is monumental.
It's very meaningful. The decennial in particular.
Yeah, the 5 years not so bad. It's bad enough. We have speaking of accreditation, both ABET and AACSB, engineering and business, is 6 and 5 year accreditation reviews, 6 and 5 years respectively. Which will also, we've got dates, teams are set up, final reports are being completed. We just sent out our ABET reports to an outside reviewer. Our AACSB team is led by the dean of the business Citadel. We'll see. But I think we're in good shape. We've been reviewing academic standards this year. No decisions made yet, but looking at this particularly looking at the credit hours and the GPA required to return, pension, and also then for suspended cadets to get back in. So that review is ongoing. I've been briefing General Wynn as the academic board team has made some progress. We implemented this year the tracks for the CIS curriculum. So incoming class 27 cadets plus upper class cadets were asked to choose one of three tracks: theory, which is traditional computer science, cyber, or IT. Those three tracks have different math sequences. I'll take the same curriculum for the first 2 years in the CIS department, but they have different math sequences. Theory track is Calc 1, Calc 2. Cyber is a stats class, and then a Calc 1. Light is not the right word, but it's Calc 1 for business, social sciences. And then is the math that matters sequence. So we'll see where that goes. There's been a fairly well dispersed dispersion of cadets across those three tracks. Again, those are not majors. It's a CIS degree, computer science degree in the CIS department of particular track. So in the second and first class year, the students start taking different courses that are part of that subject. We fully staffed the Miller Academic Center in the past few months. So last year it was running sort of which is a director, coordinator, and an admin. Because of funding through the one core, one VMI, and the Pell Grant initiative, we had to search for a new director because the previous director had resigned last September. A new director came in who had and had the team in place. So now there's director, 4 academic coordinators, and an admin. So they are in the process not only learning this place, but also looking at what the center's been doing and what we should be doing, especially as it relates to getting after those students who might need more assistance early on in order. Registrar is almost an entire new team. So new registrar February has built her team up. Lots of learning in both the MAC and the registrar. Personnel issues, so that's a good thing. And they're learning, right? So everything is brand new for that team. And next year at this time, everything will be. We implemented this year the new curriculum for non-commissioning cadets leadership lab. So non-commissioning cadets, they get their second class year, take ROTC courses, but not the lab. And now we went from a 4-semester lab sequence to second class year sequence, redesign the curriculum, try to coordinating across the different faculty who teach that, heavy focus on all those skills you need to acquire through an internship and or full-time employment. We are in the development stage for some new programming for support through the Miller Academic Center and academic advising to support at-risk students. So part of that is figuring out, you know, what do we need to do? What would be the help we would need to implement? And then how do we put that together and deliver that? So that is the process. Part of that is related to STP, so the summer transition program. We have a new director this summer, Colonel Tom Timmies. He is working with academic advising side to what are we going to build into STP this summer to start that process. General Wynn's mentioned the summer undergraduate entrepreneurship program, Jackson Hope funded. This will be the first summer. It's the first session. That's who are involved. Get credit, no tuition, no room to borrow board cost for them. We have a Constitution event every semester. This past April, it was the past and future of affirmative action. It had been 60 years since the Rights Act. do that in some timely event in the fall and spring. Undergraduate Research Symposium in April, there were about 75 more cadet presentations. That's about normal, so those are just VMI, and those are not just honor students, or students of all kinds of academic ability. Wiz mentioned the articulation agreement with DevCom Army Research Lab. We're very excited about where that's going and where it'll get built out, and particularly we're working together to try to figure out how we might support cadets who would have an internship, but then commission, but 3, 4, 5 years later, spin out, go to reserve status. And how do we keep, that relationship? Hey, I had an internship 65 years ago, and do I have an opportunity to go work for DevCom ARL at that point?
Actually, I would just mention on that slide, the ABET accreditation that's coming up is the big ball of wax for the engineering. I mean, and we went through it 6 years ago. The 6-year accreditation, it is not a rubber stamp, and they go through all of the curriculum and right sizing, and it was just a huge bonus that we got 6-year accreditation, because they also have a 3 with comments and all of these things. So for a small school, undergraduate only, that is a great feather in the cap. So we're thankful that we'll do well, or hopeful we'll do well again. So
I think we're in good shape, but thank you for not easy. It's a lot of work for the faculty. Working with Lee and get the reports done, make sure that the way accreditors work, and I haven't been on several accreditation teams, both for business, tax, where there's smoke, there's fire. And if the report is written in such a way that it's frustrating to figure out, find information, or something is out of place, or something's missing, you're like, okay, what else is wrong? So you really have to get that report in the best possible shape to take that off the table. And, but it is a lot of work. It's the process started, well, it never really ends, because every year your departments are doing assessment work. So they're keeping that data so that they can use their annual reports and write it up into.
and when you see these changes in course curriculum that come across over the next 4 years, often it relates to aligning, getting these accreditations that we have to do. So.
And in that note too, I would add all the other departments, they don't, right? We have accreditation where we're a discipline where where an accrediting body exists. Chemistry has an approval from the American Chemical Society, but most disciplines don't have accreditation. But every department here has a 5-year external review. So that would be a little different, where the department goes and finds faculty in that discipline from other universities, not necessarily from Virginia. They come across the country. And then a 2 or 3 person team comes in. It's not quite as detailed and deep as an ABET or AACSB, but it's still giving an outside group of experts access to all doing in a department here, and to write an independent report about where they see maybe deficiencies or where things are going really well, so forth. So, and we have a schedule for that, so it's a few departments. Through the generosity of Jackson Hope, we built out for the CIS cadets a research lab on an unused computer lab on the 3rd floor of the library. So that is available now. Able to use that for their research projects. So it's locked and they don't have to put their projects away. Working on some 4+1 master's programs with George Mason. Just in the initial stages of that. I asked this year, we have a faculty staff committee that puts together an orientation program for new academic, and just begin thinking about, what kind of, we're not training faculty to be military officers, but the military bearing and what they need to know about a military environment to give them a better chance of success early on. So again, ongoing with that. I've asked the academic advising committee to work this year on developing, analyzing how we train faculty advisors and putting together a manual and best practices. So some ideas for best practices.
Bob, back on new faculty onboarding, it's always been, I know, a priority to try to bring on VMI graduates into the faculty. Any comments on that and how we're doing or how tough it may be? Is it down here
Sure.
somewhere?
There it is, a P academic excellence build out. So let me
there,
talk about
sorry
that. So
about
that, good lead in. So faculty fellows, or P fellows, one of the aspects of that P academic excellence program. So we have had 3 alum that we support grad school. One has finished his master's, still has reserve commitments and works time CE department as an adjunct, but because of his reserve requirements, we have 2 in grad school. One is continuing on working toward a PhD. One is taking a pause, and I'm in the process. We have a verbal agreement. Correct, that I'm hoping that they'll be here for at least 1 or 2 years as he pauses from finishing his master's degree. And we'll be on the faculty for 1 or 2 years. So, yep.
Can you say a little bit more about when and how you use adjuncts?
When and how we use adjuncts. So adjuncts at VMI are to kind of fill in the cracks where a department might not have the need for a full-time faculty member. And I say need, right? They all say we need. They always say no department ever says we have enough full-time faculty. Everyone wants more. But there's resource implications of that. And so it fills in cracks. So you've got a faculty member on sabbatical and you need more coverage. Or your department's growing and you don't have necessarily, we're not ready yet to commit to a full-time faculty member. So we'll devote resources to part-time. So part-time faculty teach about 15–16% credit hours on a typical academic year. So it's a very small portion. Vast majority, or 85% is full-time faculty. 90% of whom are tenure track. About 10% of those full-time faculty are on multi-year contracts. So they're just not on a tenure track contract. So we don't use it like other schools where it's predominantly adjunct faculty. We are very small.
Is there a particular department that needs them more? Like, is there, if you look at your adjuncts across the faculty, do they tend to be in engineering? They tend to be in liberal arts?
So it's some departments more so. So English and history have several, but they are significant service. Or lots of cadets from different majors take history and English classes. And then I would say after those 2 departments, ECBU and adjuncts teaching some of those principal level. There's a lot of students who aren't ECBU majors who take management, marketing, principles of micro and macro, and so help serve adjunct. Other departments don't have any adjuncts. They tend to be smaller, or they don't have service oriented in the sense that you've got cadets from other majors taking a lot of classes where you're. So when we target faculty, we're really thinking about how many majors does a department have, but then when you got to also then start thinking about the service components. So English, history are the 2 largest in terms of adjuncts or adjunct courses, and so electrical engineering.
Nobody's just dropping in to pick up an electrical engineering class.
No, it's not. So we monitor that and we don't want to grow that per se. I mean, these are good people, right? Good with requisite degrees and activities and so forth, but we don't put adjuncts into uniform. They've served in the military and they have their own uniform. They can, but otherwise prefer to have faculty uniform. We can, and of course, we can't put foreign nationals, non-U.S. citizens in uniform, but we like that look, and it's beneficial in the environment here that faculty value. They've not been in uniform and going in uniform. It makes a difference. So that's what. So hopefully we'll have we have a part-time P fellow. And hopefully we'll have someone on full-time here in the fall for a year or two. And then part of that is identifying trying to get applicants to support grad school. The other part with P, of course, is chairs. And we don't have any new chairs this year, but Dick Rowe in the biology department is retiring, and he holds the Bruce Gotwald board chair, and that will be awarded to another faculty member, but that will be announced at the award ceremony on 14th May. And then we have P scholars. We have appointed for next year. We have 7 P scholars. One is graduating, and we've appointed 2 or 3 rising seconds, and we have offers out to 4 matriculants. 1 is accepted. 2 have not, because 1 just in the past week received Naval Academy scholarship, and the other one decided to go to Coast Guard Academy. He's got a full scholarship to go to Coast Guard, so we're still waiting. Women's faculty working group continues to look at some issues about women faculty, and this spring, started to bring in some non-faculty women, so administrative faculty into their group. And one change that is get before not the AAC today, but in September is a change in leave policy, and that came from that group. This is the first year for the Faculty Advisory Council. That came out of the investigative audit, and so it's an elected body of 2 representatives, 2 faculty from each of the 5 divisions, who just another way for faculty to bring issues forward if they can still go through their department head, but it's just another avenue for faculty. That's issues of concern to them in the active program. Some fun stuff. Every spring break, we send cadets to somewhere through the Olmsted Foundation for scholarship. So this year we had 8 cadets for about 10 days. Originally we were going to go to Turkey, but Turkey was too hot after last October 7th, and so Vietnam is a very safe place. I had a good trip. San Remo Law of Armed Conflicts. This is 25 military academies from across the globe who meet in San Remo, Italy every March for a symposium debate. And there's teams of cadets, and they join interdisciplinary teams. So that is, each of our cadets was on a team with 2 cadets from other military academies. And our cadets won the most awards of any military school. We had 5 awards amongst them. Great job. We'll send 20 cadets, not to Israel this May, June, but just to Poland, again, because of circumstances in Israel. But we'll spend 7 days in Poland through both my dean's office support and institute. And then General Wins mentioned honors. We had 31 honors presentations. And during honors week and a half. So it was a very large class. Their papers range from something mathy that's 10, 15 pages to an English major cadet who wrote a novel 500 pages long. So maybe it'll be the next great published novel. So great. That's my report. That's the subject.
Can you say a little more about the master's program in development, how that would actually work?
So we 4+1. We have one already with Virginia Tech and the CIS department for computer science, computer engineering. How it works is in a discipline, in this case, George Mason would work with the faculty, and they'd look at certain courses in a discipline. For example, let's take physics was one, and history is another. So you look at their curriculum, and George Mason will say, okay, here's a list of courses you offer for your major, the 300 and 400 level. And typically, if a student earns an A or B in these courses, the degree granting institution will accept those as part of the graduate degree. So George Mason in this case has to dig deep in the curriculum, talk to the faculty, understand what's being taught, the rigor of the course, and then have a list. And then the students would get that and say, okay, if you take these history courses and get an A and earn an A or a B, if you want to go to George Mason and get a master's degree in history, however many of those courses are on that list that you took and earned an A or B will count. And so instead of, typically they're set up so that the maximum number of courses you have would cover half of a 2-year master's program. So you finish in. The other thing with those is I try to structure them so that they don't have to be used immediately, direct matriculation. Again, thinking about cadets who might not be ready to go to grad school, who have other commitments, military commitments. Again, think of someone who's got a 3 or 4 or 5 year military commitment. And if I can fashion those to allow that alum to reserve status in the military, and then at year 4 or 5, trying to figure out, should I go to grad school? Should I go work? And maybe at that point, they're ready to go to grad school. So we try to structure them that way. So the degree granting institutions agreement to that. And they typically are. Maybe a little less so sometimes in some of the STEM fields where the knowledge changed so rapidly. No disrespect to history and English, but level of knowledge doesn't change quite as rapidly as it does in STEM.
George Mason's motivated, but got a good stream of candidates from.
That's right. So, you know, if you're running grad program, just like undergrad, you need students. And so if you can find ways to make it accessible without lowering your academic rigor and standards, which is why there's only a select courses and you've got to earn an A or B. And they want to look at how rigorous you are in not just the course material, but how rigorous is the course and the grading. You don't want schools that are just giving out A's and B's just so students can go get a master's degree. Thank you very much.
Morning, everyone. We'll cover just 2 topics this morning. I'm going to cover the co-curriculum and we're going to cover staff rights. I'm going to start at the top where our theme is professional and with purpose. So any of the training that we conduct has a purpose behind it and then professionally conducted. We'll go under this, it says intensive training cycle. We'll talk about where I deliver commandant's intent and then the cadets will go into a planning cycle and then they'll develop their execution plans. And then that's, of course, is advised by the comm staff. So we have a couple of components here that I want to talk to you about. Cadet leader development. We have 53% of cadet training hours are involved in cadet leader development. This is something that we've embarked on. It's here where our focus is during this academic year, where previously in this academic year, we focused on training. And the first year after COVID, we focused on getting back to regulation. Second piece that we have here is the rat line activities consumes about 19% of our training time. You can see some of the activities that we have here: 4, 8, 12, 20-mile road marches, rat challenge, house mount. We include the crucible of breakout included as well. Non-com physical fitness program started this year. It was something that we were used to seeing. Coach Cole helped us craft the program. And we turned it over to cadets to implement, and we managed that, monitored with my staff. That does not include the ROTC physical fitness, which is conducted in the morning and the afternoon. That's bracketed under academic training time or academic time. 23% of their time is focused on EMT qualification to run the CPTF, as well as a range safety officer. This is a depiction of a typical weekly training schedule. The takeaway on this, it's intense. There's a lot that goes on during the course of a week. Mondays through Saturdays, nothing on Sunday. And then that's just a typical week. Compared to April of 2020, this is twice the size of activities.
Just in a general way, what's the trade-offs? Yeah, obviously, that's a series of trade-offs, I assume, in terms of how you break the day down, but maybe share a little bit about how you had to think about those trade-offs.
Yeah, that's a good question, sir. The real key is that within these training blocks, they have ample time to train, but it's the quality of training that they do. So that's the focus here carried into this year, part of their leader development, planning and executing. So we have some recommendations for the future for training, and that would be more military training activities, which is what the Corps is asking for. The predominance, well, not the predominance, but a good part of the training for the RATs will be wearing the uniform. You get beyond that. We have embarked this year, this set into this set values code of cadet, big piece of the training. And then as well as providing the honor code. Any questions on this?
Just the one comment I would make is, you know, when you look at kind of that breakdown, all the things that occur, for me and discussions that they have with the company that leaders is, you know, nobody, rarely in the Corps is all doing the same thing all the time. You know, throughout my career, United States military, commandant's career, if you look at it in divisions and corps level units, battalion level units, nobody's doing all the same thing at the same time. Maintainers typically have a different battle rhythm than the normal infantryman or the normal SF team. And it's all about how they have the training focus and design to make sure that they can contribute to the accomplishment of the organization's mission. And so oftentimes we kind of get ourselves wrapped around the axle about, is everybody doing what everybody else is doing, right? For the bulk of the important events, the commandant and his staff manage extremely well those core activities that are fundamental to the VMI experience. And so I would just put a point of emphasis on that.
All right, next slide. Yeah, this is a big effort for us, and we're going to thank Colonel Gibson and the team up at Newmarket for pulling off a very good, very textbook staff ride. Staff rides are very important for military professional development. You get on the ground, you see for yourself what happens. You extract yourself from the battle, and you're allowed a good view of what happened, what occurred at the time, and fit the history to the ground. What we embarked on, this is our third staff ride we did. We did one at Yorktown. The American Campaigning Warfare Studies Group went up to Chancellorsville on a staff ride there, hosted by a VMI grad who's a docent for the area. And then what we studied here was, here's a depiction of the battle as it occurred, but the battle occurs in the context of both the 1862 campaign and the 1864 campaign. So we brought the cadets up there, and Keith, I mean, I need you to amplify where you can, but the real purpose here on all these staff rides is to educate on the art and science of military operations. And these are the joint principles that we focus on. Now, did we cover all these at the visit to Newmarket? No, we didn't, but we did cover some of them. So we brought the class of 2027 up. They were able to go to 7 different stations in 5 groups. They walked through a sequencing that brought them from where the initial battle was staged all the way up to the final engagement. They also saw on the other side of 81 over in this area where the VMI battery was established and contributed to the fight. This was a big success to the degree that we spent a good morning up there with the cadets, and they could actually learn from what they saw. Here's a picture of a docent, I don't know if you call him that, but one of the staff ride professionals talking to one of the groups. And then we summed it up and got everybody out of there. Anything else to add?
Yeah, we're very delighted. I also like to come out and feel that it was a very successful effort. It's the first time we've had the 4th class back on that particular battlefield, but in a broader scope. of this idea of anticipating their interest in further development of battlefield leadership. So lots of opportunities with this program. It's kind of a reimagination of what we used to do. And I was very pleased with how the staff rose to the occasion. Commandant working with our staff at Newmarket. So I look forward to continuing to refine this concept.
Next year, we're going on to the battle in Newmarket Heights outside of Phoenix.
I applaud you all for reinstituting a trip to Newmarket. It's so important in the history of the school. And I think it's great the way you've incorporated broader elements of it in the whole art and science of the campaign. First time back doing it. It's my understanding that I don't know how big the fourth class is. I know it's more than 400, and it's my understanding that only about 300 were able to make this trip. I would strongly encourage y'all to try to find ways to get more of the fourth class up there to Newmarket and becoming. General, you and I talked a little bit about this. I know that some of the athletic teams went. You mentioned basketball, wrestling, for example. But I would think that even football rats on permit, fourth classmen, this would be more important than a Saturday practice in April. In the overall knowledge building. So anything y'all can do to get more of the class there. This is a great thing. Good to see everyone experience it. I know you can't get everyone at one time, but
some of the cadets that were on guard on the GIM, there was 4 teams that were competing that day. So, we'll grow this in time, of course.
But still maybe 30% or more of the class didn't make it.
Well, I have the numbers and we can break that down. So
it's a function of scheduling, when can you fit it into the schedule as the best available time. There was a conscious decision this year, obviously, in terms of when it was scheduled, to not do it as a part of kind of the rat line activities. I mean, needless to say, with all the things that are going on, when you're in the rat line and just kind of the things that cadets are being bombarded with and being exposed to, you want to deliver the right learning points, the right teaching points as it pertains to anything that we do. But certainly when we talk about things with respect to a staff ride, which I think Keith and his team, and I wasn't there, but I know I've walked that ground with them here since I've been here, have done a fabulous job, not only telling the story of that particular battle, but also painting it in the larger context of the campaign, as the Commandant said, to also talk about in the broader context, the contribution of the Cadet Corps in that battle, VMI alum who fought for the Confederacy, but also VMI alum who fought for the Union forces during that time. So painting that holistic picture, also talking about the contributions of enslaved persons, all of those things go part and parcel to education. And so it's important. We will continue to work to try to see what we can fit in terms of the scheduling. And again, it goes back to the previous brief that the Commandant gave about just kind of how many things are going on in terms of leadership development, but it certainly is important.
thank you for your time this
Okay,
morning.
thank you.
Okay. We could go to the next slide. So obviously we've been talking a lot about and appreciate the board's approval of the strategic plan back in November. Needless to say, with all the other things going on in this academic year that we're talking about and highlighting for you today, we're also in the process of continuing to work our strategic plan to build out on the work that was done to craft the document, and now the work that needs to be done to operationalize the document and partner with the Alumni Association in terms of how we meet goals and objectives associated with our strategic vision, our strategic plan. So this is just an outline of some of the things that I'm going to talk to very briefly and very quickly, just to kind of let you know where we are. Next slide. This is just to kind of remind us of the purpose, right? The purpose of this brief is to give this board an information update on where we are with respect to the continued planning and implementation efforts that are going on with respect to the strategic plan. So we've developed a timeline that extends out into the fall where we want to do the rollout and the communications effort associated with the strategic plan. By that time, a lot of the work will have been refined where we clearly know based on those 5 key strategic initiatives, what the objectives and the associated tasks are. I'll show you a chart here in a few minutes that really kind of highlights the extent of the work. One of the things that's not in the charts that will be, okay, what are the big 5 or 10 things that are really going to be important to the success of the implementation of the strategic plan over the next 10 years. That is work that has yet to be done, but you'll get a flavor for how in depth this team is working to identify those key tasks or those assemblies. It's a reality. And then kind of the structure of how things are looking as we work right now. There's a timeline that's I want to make sure the board is aware of. The work is ongoing. We've not gotten to the point where we have all these fully laid out. And so what you're going to see are just kind of some exemplars of the work as we begin to define the tasks that are going to be essential. This is the timeline that I mentioned. And again, it took us up to the point where back in the fall, after a couple of iterations of the somewhat final draft of the strategic plan, we worked some changes and presented it to the board, got the feedback from the board, incorporated many of those changes and got a final document. And that's represented by this, which is still essentially a final document. We may make some just very, very minor tweaks to it in terms of happy to glads. For example, we kind of changed the 10-year window of the strategic plan, now reflecting from 2024 to 2034. And that's obviously under the assumption that out here in the next academic year, which will still be in 2024. Next slide. Just to remind folks, because we have some new board members, again, this is a long-standing mission of the Institute, but what we wanted to do was relook it, revalidate it. So we did that. We also revalidated the vision of the Institute. And so this is what they are. As I brief folks, I put an emphasis on the things that are in our mission that are very much rooted in the fundamentals of VMI and what VMI has always produced in terms of young men and now women also that are part of our cadet corps and the values that they take away from here once they leave. And then the values. One of the things that we discovered in doing this work was that in various different documents, we had the articulation of various different sets of values. And so what we try to do through a very deep discussion is settle on a set of values that we think encapsulates everything about the Institute. And if we stay true to these values, we're going to continue to produce and see success among our graduates. Next. And so over to the right, these are the 5 strategic initiatives that we settled on that the board approved. And we wanted to make sure that the work that we're doing going forward really highlights that. So prepare exceptional leaders, enhance academic excellence, foster esprit de corps, recruit top cadets and boost success, and then deliver on 21st century infrastructure. These obviously are different than the previous strategy, but nonetheless really define the important aspects of the Institute and the important direction of the Institute. Next. And so what is circled in there in the actions and metrics is the next set of work that is ongoing by the staff. And then on the right side, what we're really highlighting for you is what work has been done. And so after the approval of the strategic plan, the written document, the team got to work and is continuing to work on identifying, number one, how we're going to tackle this. And how we get ourselves organized for the effort of the implementation of the strategic plan. So we've identified the co-leads, and they're going to be the stakeholders that I'm going to hold accountable for the work that's being done in those various different areas. And it is a diverse group that covers kind of the span of the importance of the Institute. Everywhere from the academic program on to cadet life with the Commandant and the incorporation of the work that's necessary for not only our student athletes, but also our athletes who come extracurricular activities as well. I was briefed on the progress of the group, and I set a deadline for the end of this month to have the build out of all the associated tasks to nest with the initiatives and the objectives that have been highlighted. So the team is working on that. I'll get a brief probably somewhere in the first week of June at the latest on what all those look like by the stakeholders and a person who I'm going to introduce here in a second. And then we will spend the bulk of the summer kind of getting ourselves organized for how we'll communicate this in sort of a marketing rollout to get not only the folks that are here on posts that represent the faculty, the staff, and the cadets, understanding what the strategic plan is and what it says about where we're going, but also our alumni base, families, and those other folks that are part of the VMI family. Next. So these are the stakeholders in those 5 key initiatives. One of the clear things that I'm familiar with is the need to sometimes have a very, very detailed planning effort. But then you have a transition where you go from planning to execution. And what I'm also familiar with is having a single belly button. Someone that I could point to and say, okay, I want to know how well this effort, because it crosses a multitude of activities going on in the Institute. I want to know and I want to ensure that the efforts are being properly integrated and synchronized so that we can meet the end states that are highlighted in the strategic plan. So along with these stakeholders that you see, Colonel Bogart and Dave Gray, and that natural synergy between kind of the classroom learning of leadership and also the practical execution of learning of leadership, that's a pretty natural combination of stakeholders between Gray and between Colonel Bogart. And then under academic excellence, obviously, Dean Mareshi, Bob Mareshi, and then Rob McDonald, his associate dean. And then recruiting top cadets and boost success. I've talked about this a number of times, how we go from the recruitment of the right students, the assessment of their preparation for college life, particularly college life here at VMI, and how we move towards them getting to a point where they can be successful and success leading to graduation. And so that's going to be led by Bob Mareshi and then Shannon Escom as our acting director for strategic enrollment management. And then esprit de corps, we've tagged Bogart again, Colonel Bogart, along with Brianna Williams, our director for diversity, to lead that effort. And I think that partnership is going to result in not only some creative ideas in terms of just understanding military life, but also some forward-looking ideas in terms of preparation for the world that these graduates will expect to go into. And then final delivering on 21st century infrastructure is going to be Dallas Clark and Jeff Bubar. So belly button is going to be Lieutenant Colonel Mike McCarthy, class of 1978. Mike, you stand up. So Mike is a graduate of 1978, recently retiring from the Department of the Army as a Department of the Army civilian, spent a career in the military, and we've identified him to be our strategic planning officer. So he's going to lead the effort to integrate and synchronize those efforts.
Welcome, Mike. Welcome.
General, would it be your intent to have the new commandant step into these?
Yes, 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 absolutely. Okay, so just to kind of give you a flavor of the work that's been done. So the team took the strategic planning document, which, we had a number of stakeholders who were very much involved in that worked with Dallas and worked with Lee to craft the document. Certainly the document built off the planning guidance that I had given in the numerous discussions that have been had on how we develop and shape the next strategic plan. And so the objectives, the 19 objectives that you see are all contained in the document across those 5 key initiatives. And they've been working on a set of draft actions that will align with the major events. They've done what I'm familiar with essentially is mission analysis of this document and identified those key tasks and those that would be essential to success in this effort. And right now we're tracking what needs to be developed is roughly about 158 metrics. Far too many for me as a single person to track. And so that's why we've organized ourselves in the way that we have. And again, coming out of that, I envision some smaller number that I'm going to clearly track very closely because I think that they represent the ones that will help move the implementation of the strategy along to the greatest degree. And those are the ones that I'm going to make sure that I put my full weight behind and put my personal attention to so that they deliver on what we need to as a part of the strategic plan. Next. And so this is just kind of an example of some of the work that's being done under the strategic initiative of Deliver 21st Century Infrastructure. You see, we've highlighted the mission, what the key objective is that comes out of that particular strategic initiative, and a problem. Highlights, okay. What is it about this initiative that we've identified in terms of why it's necessary? And then the definition of associated actions. I think probably what you see is anywhere from a couple to up to about 5 actions within each of those strategic initiatives. And that's why we end up with the 19 that you saw on the previous slide. And then how do we define and assign metrics? And so these are examples of the ongoing refinement of the key metrics within this area of delivering on 21st century infrastructure. Next. This is under academic excellence. And again, there are a number that will occur. Obviously, under this are 3 action items. And so with respect to the first one, long-term, high-cost, high-priority create infrastructure to facilitate faculty development, you see that we're going to define 3 metrics as it is right now. Next, recruit top cadets and boost success, similar layout. 5 metrics associated with this stands right now. And next slide, foster esprit de corps and prepare exceptional leaders.
You see some of these becoming part of a dashboard the board could track actually. So it's a real quantitative kind of thing. Is that kind of maybe where this ultimately goes?
Yes.
It ultimately goes into the evaluation of performance of individual performance, I guess.
Yes. The stakeholders, these are the folks that I'll be holding accountable, obviously. Yes, yes, indeed. Okay. Next steps, you see the next steps that just kind of give you where we're going with the timeline as you extend it from what we showed up to the point where the board approved the strategic plan. So transitioning the strategic planning officer. So Mike is now here on the ground. He's got to do a few more transitioning type activities to kind of get himself positioned. But I think starting work here on the 10th of May. Okay, so Mike will start here the 10th of May in earnest to begin to kind of work this effort. It's gonna require him to obviously spend a lot of time getting to know the post as it exists now, because a lot of time has expired since he was here as a cadet. But just also working with the stakeholders and getting an understanding of all the work that was done prior to his arrival. And then we want to brief the Board of Visitors on the finalization of those actions and metrics. The time I've set, given when I expect to get the brief from all the stakeholders of no later than the first week in June, is to request and hopefully get the Board of Visitors to take a look at those 154 metrics and be able to show you that work somewhere between the middle towards the end of June. I've got some travel that's planned. It's going to take me out of the country, so we're going to have to work that into the schedule. And then we'll spend again the remainder of the summer to identify and do the work of how we begin to shape the marketing, government relations, studies and assessments that will be needed over the next 10 years to bring about the delivery of these areas and these strategic initiatives. I would emphasize that great planning effort, very comfortable and happy with the document. I appreciate the support and the ownership that the Board of Visitors have now accepted towards this being the strategic plan. But the reality is a lot of this work we've started some time ago. So please don't believe that because we haven't done a full rollout of this, that work has not been ongoing. When we talk about strategic enrollment management and all the things that are being highlighted as the successful work that's gone on through the integrated efforts of Joe and Shannon and the team, okay, that's a part of recruiting top cadets and boosting success. Certainly, there's more work to be done, but please understand that the work has been ongoing for quite some time, and we're going to continue to build on those efforts. And then we'll report to the Board of Visitors in stride. If you go back, we'll set up a schedule where we report to the board in stride the progress that's being made. And then we're going to think about how we can build a dashboard that perhaps somewhat real-time visualization can occur on the work that's being done. Subject to any questions.
I have a question about step 2.
Please.
So, sorry, I'm still kind of thinking through this. So in determining resource needs, can you speak a little bit to how, given the increase size of the core that we're looking at,
Yep.
I know we have a higher number of faculty and staff than we've ever had. And I know we're trying to control pushing. Can you speak a little bit to maybe in step 2 how we're going to look at sort of looking for efficiencies, maybe streamlining things like I think we see with the admissions and financial aid,
Sure.
how much they've done and how much they've processed maybe with technology or maybe with staffing needs.
Sure.
Just speak a little bit about how that process.
Sure. So I think the part about efficiencies and whether there are efficiencies to be gained will come through the assessments that are going to be done by stakeholders. And certainly that's going to be important for them to at least take a look, right? Because a lot of the discussions will be with the alumni agencies to say, okay, what are what's the feasibility of things? And then, we don't want to go in and just lay a bill on the table, if you will, to say, hey, this is the amount, everybody go and just kind of let's build towards that. We certainly do want to make sure that we're doing things as efficient as possible. There's always talk about, for example, the facilities. Number one, what's our footprint? What's our ability to expand in terms of facilities? And then what's the real need? So we've got to do an examination of that. Part of the work that's being done when we start talking about how we are re-envisioning Moody Hall as a multi-purpose facility is kind of along those lines, right? We can afford, given the footprint and given the expense of that building, we can't afford to say going to sit there for the bulk of the year, right, and house office space for the alumni agencies and then they're dedicated solely for activities centered around just reunions. We've got to think about how we get more use out of those facilities for the benefit of the core. And that's why we're able to go and present that to the legislature to get the funding need. So that just as an example, so some work to do. Any other questions? Okay, next. And so this is my last briefing. I think I've got some time here. What I wanted to do was I wanted to tee up what I believe is the decision that the board has to make. And obviously, we had a session yesterday where a very, very deep dive was done into where we sit with respect to finances. Obviously, I have a responsibility to bring to the board a recommendation of where we sit and where we need to go with respect to the decision about tuition and fees. So bottom line up front, this is the recommendation coming from the Institute to the board for consideration about the increase in tuition and what it costs. And I'll show you a slide or two that really just kind of lays out the difference between 24 and 25 with respect to the revenues that we anticipate based on the work that's being done by Dallas and his team, and then the expenses that are going to come to the Institute. And the real highlight is what are the cost drivers? What are the cost drivers that reinforce the need to do this? So salary increases are part of that. I've talked a number of times about salary increases and how they get distributed to the Institute. And I've defined them as unfunded mandates in a lot of instances, because the reality is that when the appropriation comes out from the state, only a portion of those increases that are appropriated from the state get funded by the state. The remainder of it is funded by the institutes, but we have a requirement based on that appropriation to do those things. So when you think about the workforce that we have here, we have our classified workforce, we have our A&P workforce that can be a mix with the faculty and staff. And then as a part of the Institute as a whole, we have an athletic department of people that work here as well. The state only covers about 40%, 40 cents on the dollar of those increases. The 60 cents on the dollar is essentially picked up by the Institute. We have to pay that bill. We find that bill. We do a lot of work over the legislative cycle to work with the legislature and communicate our needs. And that's important because oftentimes it allows us to go out and lay out other needs and other requests in order to get that funding. These are the highlights of this upcoming year where we see where the increased costs are. We talk about things related to the importance of how we're going to implement our strategic priorities. And then we are anticipating some revenue increases from Richmond, given the budget that was put forward to the governor for his approval. And then what are we calling it? What's he calling it?
Common ground.
The common ground budget that he foresees will result from the work of the legislature back on May 14th. And then just to let the board know that an increase of tuition and fees at least it falls in line with the communicated guidance coming from the administration about tuition and fees, tuition going up no higher than 3% or the appropriate indice. And I think in this case, it's probably the higher education price index. The lower of the two is what has been communicated to us that would be supported by the governor and the administration as we look at the cost. We could have a conversation all day long about the indices and where they look. what they look like. And the fact is that when we think about these cost increases, certainly over the last 3 years, our relative increases for tuition and fees has remained under those indices. And that might, in realistic, be the best way to look at it, but we'll evaluate it. Next slide. And so these are the quick assumptions. These are the assumptions that get developed by Dallas and his team as they build the budget estimate for each successive coming year. Certainly those numbers of 495 marry up with the goal that we set for recruitment. And then the old core number is reflective of those cadets that we anticipate would return. You put those two together, obviously it's affected by class of 25 and class of 26, which are the two classes that are the smallest within the core right now. Had a healthy class of 27, and we're anticipating a healthy size class, more in line what our numbers should look like for the class of 28. Next. And so
we're also dealing, aren't we, with a graduation class that's pretty large too. So you've got something else coming out of the.
Absolutely. So they'll roll out, which affects the math. And so with those numbers, when you look at why our numbers won't get a big boost from the 495 coming in, it's because of that. It's because we're rolling out a class that is somewhat smaller than that matriculating class, but still one of the largest classes that we've had graduate from the institute. So when you look at this, these are the costs. And this is just kind of how it rolls up, both in terms of personnel expenditures and non-personnel expenditures. Dallas went in great detail with a lot of these numbers. And so I'm not going to go into the detail, see some of the clear drivers that I mentioned with respect to the expenses, the 3% pay increase, the Chev Pell initiative, and how that's affected, and the other things that are going to drive those expenses. Go to the next slide. And so overall, again, when you add those two up, we are anticipating that the increased cost in 25 over this present FY in terms of budgeting is going to be about $4.5 million, or just over 4%. And certainly when it comes to the execution of this year's budget, that may reflect differently in terms of what the overall delta is between revenues and expenses. But this is what we're estimating. This is what we're projecting. Am I right, Dallas? Okay, next.
And gentlemen, real quick, that either very little or none of that is discretionary. All this stuff is pretty much stuff that's.
Let's pay bills. Yeah. I mean, the personnel, we're going to pay the personnel. Personnel is obviously, we're driven largely by personnel costs. I think of our budget, 63, 62?
Right around there.
Around 60, yeah, is driven by personnel costs.
Technically, that state mandated increase of salary is only for the classified employees. It's not for everybody. So is it discretionary? Yes. I support it, but just technically, that's not a requirement.
But that's the bulk of the workforce.
Wage roll.
The bulk of our workforce is not classified. Again, there's roughly, within the faculty and staff, I mean, all total, we're somewhere up around 650 in terms of our workforce. In terms of our headcount based on the authorization, the space is what we're funded for. It's a little higher than that, but it have right now somewhere around 650. Next. Okay, and so these are the anticipated revenues. Again, Dallas and his team went through this very thoroughly. And somewhere just north of the middle of this chart, you see the impact that occurs with this recommended. And then how it gives us the ability to balance with those expenses. And so again, this is just a similar roll up when we talk about this with respect to the overall increase. And so this year, the recommendation is that both for in-state and out-of-state students, there's 3% increase. That there's a 3% increase in room and board, which is not what's articulated. Room and board increases don't get articulated in language coming from state. That's up to us, but certainly there are certain cost drivers that we want to highlight that justify this. And then also similarly, 4% in auxiliary fees. And then we're recommending no increase in quartermaster fees, which again gets us to that 2.9% equating to $2.7 million of added revenue to the budget for the Institute. Next. And so I mentioned what prepare ourselves both for in-state and out-of-state tuition increases over the last 5 years compared to the indices and the state average. And so this is what you see. And so you see how we compare. I want to say in 23, just to make note that was the, I'm sorry, it was 22. 22 was the year where we didn't raise in-state tuition. 22 or 2021?
23, sir.
23. Okay, so 23, we recommended and didn't raise in-state tuition, but we did raise out-of-state tuition. And so, and again, we continue over the last 5 years to work our budget and the execution of our budget and our fiscal needs in a way that we are operating under what the indices say. So cost of living, cost of education increases continue. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to manage those things so that we fall under those. Next, out of state looks the same. Next. Okay, so the other thing that we've been thinking about and working to better understand is, so what's the net cost? What's the net cost to a student, both in-state and out-of-state, come to VMI relative to this increase? And we talk oftentimes about meeting 100% of the demonstrated need for in-state students and 60% of the demonstrated need for out-of-state students. So I asked Shannon and her team if they could go a little deeper and provide me just a little bit more granularity on what all of that means. And so this kind of gives you a breakout of the tuition and fee increase and its impact on the members of the cadet corps. So the first number is the full impact. So who's going to pay the burden of the fully burdened increase, right? And based on their calculations, roughly about 30% of the cadet corps will take on the fully burdened costs of that increase. So their costs are likely to increase based on the overall number that we're recommending, both in-state and out-of-state. All right. But the reality on that group, affordability is likely not to be a barrier. Okay. And so what does that group contain? Oftentimes it contains cadets who have not know that their expected family contribution is going to be pretty high relative to what that FAFSA, those FAFSA numbers indicate. And many of them will fund their education either through what's financed by their parents, any out-of-pocket cost or payments that are made, or any loans that they or their parents take out. The next category is those that are they've identified as high impact. And so we say about 16.35% fall into that category. They also have a high EFC and will probably pay a large portion of that amount, sometimes in some cases, depending on what types of outside grant aid money, they might not pay the full impact. So all total, we're talking about roughly about 47% of the cadet corps falls into full impact and high impact. And then you shift over to the next part of the slide, the medium impact, and you see about 44%. So these are the ones that have an expected family contribution that falls into the range to receive a full or partial grant aid. And they will be closer to the average that you see right there in terms of how much they pay, about $267 increase for those students. And then finally, low to no impact are those that are generally going to get some type of grant and aid money that will largely erase the cost of their education. So when you add that up, you're talking about now on the other side of the equation, about 53, just over 53% of the cadet corps fall into those two categories. So what's the overall impact? On average, the in-state cost increase after grant and aid money is applied on average is going to be about a $267 increase to the cadet corps. And then on average, the out-of-state cost increase after you apply grant and aid is going to be about $1,119. And so the last chart, again, just restating the recommendation. Recommendation is that the board approve an overall 2.9% increase, which would be represented by 3% tuition increase for Virginia, non-Virginia, 3% of room and board, and 4% on auxiliary fees. Total increase to cadets would be 2.9%. And again, just re-emphasizing that that recommendation falls in line with the current guidance that was given from the administration on any increases that would occur on tuition.
General Wins?
Yes.
So, sorry to interrupt. The number you gave of, I think it was 200 and for in-state cadets and 1,100. Yeah.
Right.
Is that, it probably is on there. Is that per semester or per year?
That's per
year. Okay, great.
Any other questions?
Sorry, gentlemen, and maybe Dallas, you have the answer to this, but so last year, if I remember right, we agreed on a 3% in-state, out-of-state increase in tuition fees, right?
That's correct.
And the year before, I know there was a difference between in-state and out-of-state, but fresh, I remember.
The year previous, we had proposed to the board, we brought forward to the meeting a 3% increase for Virginia, non-Virginia, and we determined in that meeting, motion was passed to leave in-state tuition at 0, and the out-of-state remained at 3.
Okay, and that was inclusive of fees, or just it was purely on tuition?
The 0, from 3 to 0 was purely on tuition. Continue to have the increases in the fees.
Okay.
On the in-state. The out-of-state stayed 3% charges that on tuition, and the fees on out-of-state remained. A lot of emphasis, as you recall, just a backup from the history of other members of the board. Administration working with all institutions, really pushing for holding tuition for Virginians at 0. So the board responded to that.
Thank you.
Any other questions on that? The last thing I want to mention is I just want to bring to the board's attention some new language that comes through the General Assembly, was signed by the governor relative to name, image, and likeness. And so the Code of Virginia has now been amended to enact that intercollegiate athletics student athletes and the colleges can work together and manage how students can be paid for the use of their name, image, and likeness in college athletics. This was an effort that was largely driven by the 3 colleges that are public colleges that are in the Commonwealth that play Division I athletics in kind of the Big 5 conferences, FBS level, UVA, Virginia Tech, and Old Dominion. Obviously, there are other colleges that are kind of making that move from FCS to FBS. This language also is different from the language that is being operated under the policies of the NCAA. What it means for all the colleges in the Commonwealth is that by law, colleges in the Commonwealth have the ability, working through 501c3 or some type of business entity, they do have the ability to set the framework and establish how they want to operate under an NI framework. I will tell you that as it pertains to the current conference, our conference and many other conferences are now having conversations about whether or not they are going to continue to operate under the rules of the NCAA, or as more states adopt a similar framework like this, this enacted law operate another way. I think for the Institute, it's something that we will need to study and make a determination about, where we'll do some work here at the Institute as staff and lay out a case one way or the other and make a recommendation to the board, working hand in hand with the alumni agencies, because I think that for the alumni agencies, they believe right now that the new law would allow them as a 501, as an existing 501c3, to form or be part of a collective. And this is kind of the shape of intercollegiate athletics and the way it's going. It's competitive. I would tell you that also when you think about the impact to the various different colleges, there are levels to this thing. So certainly among the big schools, those that are in the FBS level of play, you're probably going to see some or more of this. You're already seeing a lot of it as it pertains to the schools. But I think within the FCS, there's still a model out there that operates that is about kind of the true idea of athletics, right? You go, and a lot of Olympic sports are just young men and women who are interested in being student athletes. They value the college scholarship that they have, whether it's full or partial, and day in and day out, they are more concerned with how they can get the most out of their talents as a Division I athlete, also get a great education. And so oftentimes when I sit around the table with the other college presidents that are in the conference, and I think Jim Miller would attest that when he sits around the table with the athletic directors that are in the conference, that oftentimes there are conversations, myth busters, if you will, right? Rather than hear that some school is paying some student hundreds of thousands of dollars, a lot of times those conversations end up helping us better understand what's really happening. But it doesn't take away from the fact that as college athletics and the NCAA is evolving, these are the things that are happening right now. Some of this affected by both NIL as well as the transfer portal may normalize in the near future, but this is kind of the trend and the direction that intercollegiate athletics seems to be going. We're going to have to take a look at it and we'll see what the impact might be. And then we'll come back to the board and lay out a case and make a determination and a recommendation.
Your sense that within the Southern Conference, do you want to be a leader in this area or a follower?
Yeah. So my view is that we want to be a follower in this. We don't want to be the school when all the myths are cleared up and things settle. Someone points to VMI and says, you know what? VMI is doing it, and they're doing it at a scale greater than any other school in the conference. Number one, that's my view. I do believe that, however, we need to take a serious look and not form just a view, a resistant view or a negative view about this, because again, it is going to impact. It already is impacting what's happening at the highest level of And it could potentially over time affect, what's happening at, the FCS level, the Division II level, and maybe even the Division III level for that matter. It's all about young people monetizing their talents in such a way where, whether we like it or not, it's a business model that's emerging, and you know, that's kind of the way it is.
It could definitely drive more students to the portal, I would think.
I'd probably ask Jim, but yeah, I mean, I would think as well.
Yeah.
I would think as well. It could potentially. Particularly if it scales up, you know, and that's the fear, you know, how will this scale up? But again, right now, I wouldn't be of the view that, you know, the stories that you hear oftentimes are stories of what's happening kind of at the elite level. And across the board, it's not happening at kind of the middle tier, mid-major, and below mid-major level, to my knowledge. Okay.
Well done by you and the team. Thank you very much. And any final questions or thoughts before we break to committees? We're ready to make them, but thank you, everybody. It's been all well done and we kept the schedule. I'm sorry, go ahead, Bill.
Academic affairs,